What did Joseph Smith know? Questions and concerns. Joseph Smith was an authentic religious genius, unique in our national history. Smith's insights could have come only from a remarkably apt reading of the Bible, and there I would locate the secret of his religious genius. So strong was the act of reading that it broke through all the orthodoxies, Protestant, Catholic, Judaic, and found its way back to elements that Smith rightly intuited had been censored out of the stories of the archaic Jewish religion. Smith's radical sense of the theomorphic patriarchs and the anthropomorphic God is an authentic return to J, or the Yahwist, the Bible's first author. Non-Latter-day Saint, American literary critic, Yale professor of humanities, Harold Bloom. This section covers the items in the other category of criticism and evidence of the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith. I chose only a handful of interesting examples. If this section included everything, this letter would be inordinately long. Is anything in this section absolute proof that Joseph was a prophet? Not quite. However, so much of what is in this section goes unnoticed or is disregarded by non-believers. Some of the evidence cited in this section is highly inconvenient for critics. Enoch. In 1830, Joseph Smith took 5 verses from the Bible and turned them into 110 verses in Moses 6 through 7. These 110 verses present serious problems for critics. Moses 6 through 7 may be the greatest corroborating evidence beyond the Book of Mormon of Joseph's role as a revelator. To an 1830s critic of Joseph Smith, the added scriptures regarding Enoch likely seem like nonsense or blasphemous, the incoherent ramblings of a delusional fraudster. Then, various books of Enoch came to light, including the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1940s. The parallels between Joseph's Enoch and ancient Enochic literature are astounding. What are the odds of Joseph Smith making up the details in Moses that match so much of the Enochic literature? Why do critics ignore Joseph Smith's Enoch? Enoch in the Book of Moses. Moses 6:31. Why is it that I have found favor in thy sight, but am but a lad, and all the people hate me, for I am slow of speech, wherefore am I thy servant? Note that Joseph Smith uses the word lad in no other book or scripture or personal writing. 3rd Enoch. And because I was the youngest among them, and a lad amongst them with respect to days, months, and years, therefore they called me lad. Moses 6:34. Behold, my spirit is upon you, wherefore all thy words will I justify, and the mountains shall flee before you, and the rivers shall turn from their course, and thou shalt abide in me, and I in you, therefore walk with me. Note that nowhere in the Bible is there an instance of a river changing course. Mandaean Enoch. The Supreme Life replied, Arise, take thy way to the source of the waters, turn it from its course. At this command, Tavril, the angel speaking to Enoch, indeed turned the pure water from its course. Moses 6:38. There is a strange thing in the land, a wild man hath come upon us. Book of Giants. The wild man, they call me. Moses 6:40. There came a man unto him whose name was Mahijah, and said unto him, Tell us plainly, who art thou, and from whence thou comest? Note that Mahijah, the only other named character in Enoch's story of the Book of Moses, is only noted for asking direct questions to Enoch. Moses 7:2. I was journeying and stood upon the place Mahujah and cried unto the Lord. Book of Giants. The Gibborim sent one of their fellows named Mahujah to consult Enoch in order to receive an authoritative interpretation of the visions. Then all the Gibborim and the Nephilim called to Mahujah, and he came to them. They implored him and sent him to Enoch, the celebrated scribe, and they said to him, Go, tell him to explain to you and interpret the dream. Moses 6:32. And the Lord said to Enoch, Go forth and do as I have commanded thee, and no man shall pierce thee. Open thy mouth, and it shall be filled, and I will give thee utterance. Mandaean Enoch. Little Enoch, fear not. You dread the dangers of this world. I am come to you to deliver you from them. Fear not the wicked, and be not afraid that the floods will rise up on your heads, for their efforts will be in vain. It shall not be given them to do any harm to thee. Moses 6:32. And the Lord said to Enoch, Go forth and do as I have commanded thee, and no man shall pierce thee. Open thy mouth, and it shall be filled, and I will give thee utterance. 2 Enoch 39:5. It is not from my own lips that I am reporting to you today, but from the lips of the Lord I have been sent to you. For you hear my words out of my lips, a human being created exactly equal to yourselves, but I have heard from the fiery lips of the Lord. Moses 7:13. The roar of the lions was heard out of the wilderness. Book of Giants. The roar of the wild beasts has come, and they bellowed a feral roar. Moses 6:46. A book of remembrance we have written among us, according to the pattern given by the finger of God, and it is given in our own language. Book of the Giants. Correspondingly, in the Book of Giants, a book in the form of 2 stone tablets is given by Enoch to Mahujah to stand as a witness of their fallen state and a betrayal of their covenants. Jubilees 10:17. For Enoch's office was ordained for a testimony to the generations of the world, so that he should recount all the deeds of generation unto generation till the day of judgment. Moses 6:47. And as Enoch spake forth the words of God, the people trembled and could not stand in his presence. Book of Giants. The leaders of the mighty warriors bowed down and wept in front of Enoch. Moses 6:52. If thou wilt return unto God, and hearken unto my voice, and believe, and repent of all thy transgressions. Book of Giants. Now then, unfasten your chains of sin, and pray. Moses 7:38. But behold, these shall perish in the floods, and behold, I will shut them up, a prison have I prepared for them. Book of Giants. He imprisoned us and has power over us. The Book of Abraham. When criticizing the Book of Abraham, critics focus on the translation method. To this day, critics and apologists debate which parts of the papyri were translated, whether it was a translation or a revelation, and the length of the papyri. Most of what Egyptologists know today about ancient Egyptians comes from the 18th dynasty around 1500 BC, 1300 years before Joseph Smith's 200 BC papyri. What is more interesting to me is the actual text itself. Few critics seem to engage with the text of the Book of Abraham. Like Enoch and Moses 6-7, what we've learned about Abraham since the 1840s is incredible, considering what Joseph revealed about Abraham in the Pearl of Great Price. In Brett McDonald's YouTube series, LDS Truth Claims, he takes 2 videos to cover the 24 items in the Book of Abraham that Joseph Smith would not know or assume from the Bible or from 1835 to 1842 resources. These items have later been found or confirmed in other apocryphal sources, like the Book of Jubilees, published in 1850, the Testament of Abraham, published in 1892, and the Apocalypse of Abraham, published in 1897. Parallels between apocryphal sources post-1842 and the Book of Abraham, pre-1842. The existence of a record written by Abraham. The Bible provides no hint that a Book of Abraham ever existed. Abraham's literacy and his possession of ancient records, Abraham 1:28. Abraham's desire to be one who possesses great knowledge, Abraham 1:1. His desire to be a high priest, holding the priesthood, is described as the right belonging to the fathers, Abraham 1:1-3. His successful quest to find God, Abraham 1:1-3 and 2:12. The rebellion of his fathers, who had once received the priesthood but turned to idol worship according to Egyptian practices, Abraham 1:4-10. The practice of human sacrifice, including the sacrifice of children, as part of the practice of local idolaters in Chaldea, Abraham 1:7-11. The killing of people who refused to worship idols of stone or wood, Abraham 1:11. The violent seizing of Abraham by local priests to slay Abraham also as a human sacrifice, Abraham 1:12, facsimile 1. The role of Terah, Abraham's father, in seeking to have Abraham killed, Abraham 1:30. The use of an altar fashioned like a lion couch, facsimile 1, described as the bedstead, Abraham 1:13, in an attempt to kill Abraham. Description of canoptic jars in front of the altar in facsimile 1 as representing pagan gods, Abraham 1:13, and a reference to the god of Pharaoh, Abraham 1:6. The miraculous delivery of Abraham from death by the power of God, who sent an angel to free Abraham after Abraham cried to the Lord, Abraham 1:15, 2:13. The destruction of the altar and idols by the Lord, Abraham 1:20. Abraham's possession of sacred records from the past, Abraham 1:28-31. A famine in Chaldea before Abraham went to Canaan, Abraham 1:29-30-2:1. The repentance of Terah, Abraham's father, and his subsequent return to idolatry after the famine abated, Abraham 1:30-2:5. Abraham's age of 62 years when he departed out of Haran, Abraham 2:14. Genesis 12:4 gives 75 years old. The winning of souls in Haran, apparently by Abraham's preaching, who followed Abraham into Canaan, Abraham 2:15. Building an altar in the land of Jershon before entering Canaan, where Abraham prayed for relief from the famine for the benefit of his father's family, Abraham 2:17. Two other altars would later be built, Abraham 2:18-20. Abraham's possession of the Urim and Thummim given to him by God, Abraham 3:1. Abraham's knowledge of stars, planets, and astronomy was obtained through revelation, Abraham 3:1-18. Abraham teaching astronomy in Egypt. Revelation to Abraham about the premortal existence of spirits or intelligences in the presence of God, including information on a great council in heaven where plans were established for this earth and our mortal trial here, Abraham 3:18-28. Why do critics exclude the text of the Book of Abraham in their criticism of it? Deuteronomist reforms. In the Old Testament, 2 Kings 22-23, King Josiah instituted several reforms around 620 BC. Non-Latter-day Saint biblical scholar Margaret Barker highlights the complicated consequences of the reforms. King Josiah and his reformers, the Deuteronomists, changed the Israelite religion and temple worship forever. In Lehi's day, the book of Deuteronomy would have been a newer book to him. The reforms potentially removed elements from the temple and religion that alluded to a sacrificial Messiah, the divine feminine, the tree of life, or menorah, and the destruction of Jerusalem. How did Joseph Smith understand the complex religious issues in Lehi's day, a generation after the aggressive King Josiah reforms? Isn't it interesting that Lehi focuses on the destruction of Jerusalem, the tree of life, and a suffering Messiah, the teachings that had been potentially recently removed from the Israelite religion? The original temple tradition was Yahweh, the Lord, was the Son of God, the Most High, and was present on earth as the Messiah. This means that the older religion in Israel would have taught about the Messiah. Thus, finding Christ in the Old Testament is exactly what we should expect, though obscured by incorrect reading of the Scriptures. This is, I suggest, one aspect of the restoration of the plain and precious things which have been taken away. 1 Nephi 13:40. Margaret Barker. How did Joseph Smith nail the family dynamic between Lehi, Nephi, and Laman and Lemuel? Laman and Lemuel complained that Lehi was a visionary man. Then they claimed that the Jews in Jerusalem were righteous because they followed the law. Wouldn't that be precisely what they would say if they were in the Deuteronomist camp? How did Joseph Smith guess the tension between the Deuteronomists and the traditionalists like Lehi? Does this prove the Book of Mormon is an ancient record of people from Jerusalem who left and came to the Americas? It does not. But how did Joseph Smith keep getting these details right decades before scholars knew them? Sacrifices outside of Jerusalem. Why does 1 Nephi talk about offering a sacrifice unto the Lord in the wilderness? Doesn't Deuteronomy 12 state that sacrifices are only offered at the temple? After the Deuteronomist reforms, sacrifices are only offered at the temple. So it's curious that Lehi, as soon as he was 3 days in the wilderness, built an altar of stones and made an offering unto the Lord. 1 Nephi 2, 6-7. Why would Joseph Smith include this detail? An ancient document called the Temple Scroll was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It came to light over 100 years after the publication of the Book of Mormon. How crazy is it that the Temple Scroll reiterates that sacrifices outside the temple are allowed if getting back to Jerusalem is more than a 3 days journey? You shall not slaughter a clean ox or sheep or goat within all your towns near to my temple within a distance of 3 days' journey. Nay, but inside my temple you shall slaughter it. making it a burnt offering or a peace offering, and ye shall eat and enjoy before me at the place on which I shall choose to put my name. The Temple Scroll, 11 QT 52, 13 through 16. How did Joseph Smith figure this out? Thieves versus robbers. In modern English, the words thief and robber are generally used interchangeably. Not so in the ancient Near East. Anciently, there was a significant legal difference between how to handle a thief and a robber. In the Book of Mormon era, a thief was someone within the community who stole from his or her neighbor. A thief would be subject to a system of local laws and punishments. By contrast, a robber is an outsider. An outsider may pose a threat to the community. Thus, a robber may require military intervention. The justification for military action is that removing the threat of robbers is better than having them overrun the city or nation. Isn't it fascinating that there is a clear distinction between thieves and robbers in the Book of Mormon? Take a look at the interaction between Laban and the sons of Lehi. Laban was angry and thrust him out of his presence, and he would not that they should have the records. Wherefore he said unto him, Behold, thou art a robber, and I will slay thee. 1 Nephi 3:13. By labeling the sons of Lehi as robbers, Laban could take military action against them and slay them. The accusation that they are robbers is deliberate by Laban. At the same time, Laban accelerated his demise by labeling Nephi as a robber and outsider. This could be the reason why the Lord uses the law of the land and Laban's reasoning to justify Nephi in taking Laban's life. Laban's behavior leading up to his death put him in the robbery camp. The Lord's statement to Nephi makes Laban an outsider by contrasting him with the nation of Lehi. The Lord tells Nephi, It is better that one man should perish than a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief. 1 Nephi 4:13. How did Joseph Smith understand ancient Israelite laws regarding thieves and robbers? The land of Jerusalem. In the Bible, Jerusalem is only portrayed as a city. The Book of Mormon references the city and the land of Jerusalem. This supposed error made by Joseph Smith drew some criticism at the time. Quote, There is no such land, no part of Palestine bears the name of Jerusalem except the city itself, close quote. Origen Bachelor, 1838. Since the 1830s, several ancient artifacts, including the Amarna letter, discovered in 1887, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in the 1940s, have confirmed that Jerusalem was both a city and a land. Behold, wrote Abdi Heba, the king of Egypt has set his name in the land of Jerusalem forever, so he cannot abandon the lands of Jerusalem. Tumbaga. A set of pure gold plates the size and dimension of the Book of Mormon plates would have weighed around 100 pounds. Yet witnesses who hefted the Book of Mormon plates claimed they weighed more like 40 to 60 pounds. Tumbaga is a metal alloy used in ancient South and Central America. It usually consists of copper and gold. Geologist Jerry Grover estimates that Tumbaga plates would have weighed approximately 54 to 58 pounds. Plus, a gold and copper alloy would be easier to write on than pure soft gold. Is Tumbaga why some witnesses describe the plates as having the appearance of gold? Is Tumbaga the reason why William Smith said that they were a mixture of gold and copper? Casting arrows. The Book of Mormon contains a handful of references to bows and arrows. Nephi breaking his bow is the first example. Curiously, the Book of Mormon sometimes refers to arrows being shot, and at other times to arrows being cast or thrown. In Alma 49, Nephites had dug up a ridge of earth around them, which is so high that the Lamanites could not cast their stones and their arrows at them. Verse 4. Nephites prepared to destroy all such as should attempt to climb up to enter the fort by any other way, by casting over stones and arrows at them. Verse 19. But behold, in these attempts they were swept off by the stones and arrows which were thrown at them. Verse 22. Why would Joseph Smith mix the words thrown and cast into the Book of Mormon references to use of arrows? Below is an artist's depiction of an ancient American weapon, the atlatl, used in Aztec and Mayan cultures as early as 4000 BC. Jacob chapter 5. The longest chapter of the Book of Mormon is an allegory where the Lord of the vineyards tends to his olive tree vineyard. The chapter compares the handling and caring of the orchard to the scattering and gathering of Israel. The description of olive tree maintenance is detailed by an experienced hand. Even in areas where the allegory splits from botanical rules are instructive. When did Joseph Smith become so acquainted with olive tree cultivation that he could make up the allegory? Is there any evidence that he, his family, or his neighbors grew olives in upstate New York or Vermont? Jacob 5 quotes this allegory from a non-biblical ancient prophet named Zenos. After the publication of the Book of Mormon, critics scorned Joseph Smith for the seemingly made-up story and prophet. No other author in the Bible references the olive tree allegory or the prophet Zenos. Interestingly, though, in 1887, scholars discovered an early Christian apocryphal writing called the Apocalypse of Peter. Some early Christian churches considered it part of the New Testament scripture. Below is an excerpt from the Apocalypse of Peter, in which Peter asked the Lord more about the fig tree, which he cursed, in Mark 11:11 through 21. Hint, swap out fig tree for olive tree. And I, Peter, answered and said unto him, Interpret unto me concerning the fig tree, whereby we shall perceive it. For throughout all its days doth the fig tree send forth shoots, and every year it bringeth forth its fruit for its master. What then meaneth the parable of the fig tree? We know not. And the master, Lord, answered and said unto me, Understandest thou not that the fig tree is the house of Israel? Even as a man that planteth the fig tree in his garden, and it brought forth no fruit. And he sought the fruit thereof many years, and when he found it not, he said to the keeper of his garden, Root up this fig tree, that it make not our ground to be unfruitful. And the gardener said unto God, Suffer us to rid it of weeds, and dig the ground round about it, and water it. If then it bear not fruit, we will straightway remove its roots out of the garden, and plant another in place of it. Hast thou not understood that the fig tree is the house of Israel? Guerrilla warfare. Daniel Peterson identifies the authenticity of guerrilla warfare in the Book of Mormon in his 1990 book, Warfare in the Book of Mormon. Combat depicted in the Book of Mormon differs significantly from the type of warfare familiar to Joseph Smith. Only a couple of generations removed from the Revolutionary War, Joseph seems to romanticize the formality of warfare typical in the late 18th to early 19th century era, namely, two opposing armies in official uniforms. The Book of Mormon, however, accurately depicts genuine guerrilla warfare. Book of Mormon warfare operates on principles of stealth, surprise, hidden base camps, small-scale skirmishes, strategic retreats, favorable terrain, and submersive propaganda. How did Joseph Smith think of the authentic warfare tactics of the Gadianton robbers? Is there any evidence that he was familiar with different types of warfare? Ether's genealogy. We learn from several witnesses that Joseph Smith had no manuscript or sources while translating the Book of Mormon. Emerson said, after meals or after interruptions, Joseph would at once begin where he had left off, without either seeing the manuscript or having any portion of it read to him. This was the usual thing for him to do. How did Joseph Smith remember a list of 30 Jaredite kings and names in the Book of Ether, chapter 1, and then remember to discuss each king and name in reverse order in Ether 6 through 11? Isn't this feat incredible if Joseph Smith was making up the Book of Mormon off the top of his head? 100 different names for Christ. The Book of Mormon contains at least 100 different names and titles for Jesus Christ. How did Joseph Smith do that? Isn't the variety in how the names are woven into the text incredibly impressive for someone making up the book on the spot? Susan Black illustrated the variety in a 1978 Ensign article, which I've recreated below. Nephi's bow. Isn't it interesting that when Nephi's steel bow breaks, he does not use his old arrows with his wood bow? He makes an arrow from the same wood as his new bow, 1 Nephi 16:23. Anyone unfamiliar with archery would not include that tidbit. However, including that subtle detail hints that this is a recorded event. Nephi's arrows from the steel bow would not have been suitable for his wood bow. Conclusion of How did Joseph Smith know? In my opinion, no one item listed above and many more unlisted proves Joseph Smith's claim of divine intervention. However, Joseph's ministry becomes more unbelievable in a natural sense when triangulating the affirmative signs. I've grown surprised at how the critical community widely ignores items like Enochic literature, Jaredite kings, the land of Jerusalem, and the sacrifices allowed 3 days out from the temple. I kept getting the nagging feeling they were looking for ways to doubt, instead of looking at the whole picture. There are plenty of reasons to question the Restoration's truth claims. That said, it is also true that simply writing off the faith-promoting elements is not becoming of a light and truth seeker.